Well, hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be connected again to the US because I miss you. I haven't been there in a long time. So we are today in the vineyard in Vineyard. You are on the top of the hill, and we are getting close to harvest. So I think I'm going to make a little introduction to my grapes. So this is a very nice parcel vineyard. Which goes into La Jalousie. And you can see here that we have a very traditional way of conducting the vine. It's a Y shape of pruning. And so that's very traditional, and the vine is on wires. The problem with that is that when it grows, the leaves overlap, and very often they cover the bunches. So there you see you have humidity, and it makes some rot, and we have to take leaves off, and that takes a time, and of course time is money. So I went through old books and looked at the way the vine were farmed in the old times, and I've decided that I will do that now. So we are going to the next vineyard, which is called Les Gobelets. And this is the way they farm it in Beaujolais, for example. And this is a much freer way of growing for the vine. You see that the branches are free. So in the wind, now tonight there is absolutely no wind, but normally, they get good ventilation, and the berries, the fruits, get much more exposure. You can see that one of the problems this year is that the flower happened in very different times. It took about a month for all the flowers to bloom, and therefore we have different stages of maturity. You see, this is completely green, and this is already starting to rot, and it's already it's not completely mature. I take one. It's still quite acidic, although I think within 1 or 2 days, it will be good to harvest. What's interesting also is to see the pip. The pip should be, I'll take another berry, but the pip has to be brown and crunchy. Voilà. You see, this pip is still a little green. So that means it's not ready to produce another plant, and that means it's not totally mature. So this is a very important sign for us. Voilà, so this is about harvest. Now you see between the rows that there is grass. At this time of the year, you only see green, but in the spring, there is many flowers. There are many flowers, many different flowers. And now we inventory the flowers and the plants, and we have this great encyclopedia which explains what they mean about the soil. This is how the soil talks. So, for example, if you have a lot of chamomilla, it means that the soil retains too much water. So you have to seed another plant, which is also a wild plant, but you can get some seeds, and in order to solve that problem. So we've been managing the soil in the vineyard now for 3 years that way. It's a slow process to solve if there are problems, but it's a very good process because it's very, very natural. And also, having all this vegetation, all this growing in the vineyard, helps keep the balance, which is one of the very important things in biodynamics, is to keep the balance, always keep the balance. When you do monoculture, you unbalance nature. So having other plants sort of rebalance, it rebalances the soil, as I explained, and we have also some trees, so you're probably not going to see them very well because the sun is there, but Can you show this, please? Yeah, these they naturally grew there, and we have kept the strongest one, and those are there to recreate a balance in the vineyard. So they are very important for the insects, for the birds, and eventually they can also probably solve the problem of drought, because a tree acts like a pump. And so if we have a good rhythm of trees in the vineyard, we have more water coming up, and the tree doesn't keep the water for itself. It spreads the water around, and then it goes to the vineyard. So it's been scientifically demonstrated that around the trees, depending upon the size, of course, small trees don't give much water, but when they grow, then the soil is more moist. Now the problem, of course, is if they make too much shadow, then the fruits of the vine won't get mature. So we have to see. This is an experimental. We will see how we manage that. But we are approaching the end of the vineyard, and we are getting into what we call the coulée. First of all, you get to see that wall, which is made with schist, like slate. You see, in the old times, when the people planted vines, they took lots of stones from the soil because it was too hard to work with all these stones in the soil, and they built up some walls to protect the vineyard from wild animals. But now some of these walls have remained, and I think they are very beautiful. So the coulée, I was talking about the coulée. It's all this area which is along all my vineyard, and which is sort of wilderness. It's not the jungle, of course, but you can see, maybe you can film the little alley here. You can see that those are bushes that we let them grow naturally. Now we have a walk that's going to go through that to a well that is very pretty. So if you come to France, you have to come and visit that. But this is really a paradise for birds, for deer, for lots of animals. And so that's also part of keeping the balance. And here, along the alley I'm walking, you have some more trees. Those are fruit trees. They are all varietals that you can't find anymore in the market, because they don't always look nice, or maybe they get rotten. They are uneven, but they are very delicious. So I have old pear trees, old apple trees, old apricot, and they have a hard time growing here because it's on the stone, but they have made a lot of progresses, and we have had a few fruits this year. So on the right side, you have my oldest vines. They have been planted in probably the beginning of the 20th century, just after the phylloxera crisis. So in fact, I don't know if you are familiar with the phylloxera. It's an insect that came from the United States and found that it had no predator here, and it found that our vine, Vitis vinifera, was very delicious. And so it destroyed the entire European vineyard, which was really a catastrophe. And so the solution was to get vines from the US, I think mainly from California, other vines, which are not Vitis vinifera, but Vitis riparia, Vitis rupestris, and so on, which are phylloxera resistant, and to graft our Vitis vinifera on these vines, on these American vines. So it gives, we only have now a few left of these very old vines, but I think they are like my museum. And I like very much this one, which I think is very pretty in the sunset. And they still have fruits, and the fruits are quite delicious. In fact, vines are not programmed to die, so they can forever produce fruit. And the more the deeper their roots go, the better the fruits are. So my private customers harvest that every year, and you are of course invited. So now we are going down a little bit, and we are going to see quite well the roof of the chateau and the way the landscape in Savenière has been built over the years. So you see the roof on the right here, and we will go down later. So you have the chateau here and the church and the village of Savenière. And around the chateau, you can see that the trees are trees from a park. They're quite civilized. They have been planted in 1850. And then you see another chateau to the left, which is Chateau de Varennes, which now no longer has vineyards, but used to be to have quite a big vineyard. And then if you see the park, all those beautiful cedar trees and other trees. And then you see the top of the Château de la Roche-aux-Moines, which is the chateau where Nicolas Joly lived. And behind is La Coulée-Théran. Then you have more trees, and you have Domaine aux Moines with Tessa-la-Roche, and underneath is the vineyard called Roche-aux-Moines. And then it continues, but we don't see the others. But you see all around Savenière, which is like a plateau, you have 17 chateaux with parks and vineyards. And the other way, perpendicular to the Loire, you have these coulées. So my coulées, which is le coteau des coulées, sorry. Then over there, down from La Roche-aux-Moines, you have les petites coulées, and behind you have La Coulée-Théran. So these three coulées and all the parks surrounding Savenière create a very interesting landscape for a vineyard. I think it's very unique, and it really shelters a lot of biodiversity. There is an incredible amount of birds, of different kinds of birds, like 70 different species. For you in America, you still have a lot of animals, but here in France, it's disappearing. And Savenière is one of the shelters of this wildlife. So we are very proud of it. Now we are going to go down to the park, and we're going to use a little path going down, which has lovely flowers. And what is quite interesting is that at sunset, the bats come out from a place in the park, little tunnel, and they go up this coulée, this little path, and they come into the vineyard, and they eat Eudélis and Cochilis, which are two butterflies that destroy the vines, but not the vines, but the grapes. And this has been like that for years and years and years. So people in Savenière never had to use insecticides. Well, anyway, now most people are organic or biodynamic or both. But this is and it's something that has been studied by INRA, which is a research center, and they are creating a model to be reproduced in other vineyards that have totally lost their life, their wildlife, and their balance. Now you see the cyclamens here. So they're not totally wild. I planted some of them about 15 years ago, but very few. And apparently they're very happy here. So they are developing. So this is a path that our customers use to go up to the vineyard and to get a good feeling of the landscape, the fact that the vine is on a hill, so they can feel it's hard to come up here. And they have the view over the Loire. And so I truly think that our wines taste like the landscape. So for me, it's very important that people come up here and understand where these grapes grow. So I'm going to try not to fall. Very steep. Voilà, we have a beautiful light. The sunset here in the Loire Valley is particularly pretty. Very good time to take a walk. Very peaceful. So that's a little bridge over the road going to Angers. And we are entering the park. So at the end of the 19th century, even mid-19th century, I would say, the Loire, which was the main way of transportation, got very sandy, and it became a real problem. So the government decided to build the rail track Paris-Nantes, and this was to save the local economy. So interestingly enough, some finance people from Paris invested at that time in Vineyard. And that's when they built these 17 chateaux. There were already some houses there, but they were probably old and old-fashioned. And so they changed and built typical Anjou chateau. And we are in an area where there is a lot of nurseries. And so the people saw that there was money. So they came in with their catalog and proposed all the trees, the different trees to plant. So those parks, they are not real gardens, they are parks. They are mostly arboretums, I would say. So you have a lovely view of the park here. And we're going to take the alley, which used to be planted with oak trees. That's before, in the 17th, 18th century. We have one oak tree still there. It's a very old tree. And it was to protect, to make shadow over the path that is here. And what was the reason for that? The reason for that is, in fact, that we have here normally a river. This is part of the Loire. This is an arm of the Loire. It's called Boire here in Anjou. And there was a little dock in front of the house. We will see the place later. And the wines used to be shipped in barrels on flat little boats that went to the main Loire and were loaded on sailboats. But here, where some men were pulling those small barges. And so the oak trees were there to make shade so that they wouldn't be too hot. Now the Loire has been used a lot for its sand. They dug out a lot of sand for the construction. And so the level has gone down 4 meters, which is huge, in the last 40 years. And now the result is that the Loire itself is extremely low. It's only now 40, 50 centimeters right now. I took a boat 2 days ago. We were bumping on the bottom all the time. And here, this is empty. If you come in the winter, it's very full, and it goes until the house almost. It's like a lake. We have no more park. We have a lake. But what is interesting to understand is that a lot of vineyards have been developed in history along rivers because they were a means of transportation. They haven't been planted there just because they were nice terroir. This is a story. But the real thing is because there was a river. And then after there was the train. So the best vineyards are along rivers, mostly, I would say. Voilà. So you see the animals taking a little swim. So we are going up to the chateau. And then we will go to the real thing, where in the cellar. These are my geese. Voilà. When you come, I will have foie gras for you. Very good with 7 years. Voilà. So this is a very typical house of, I would say, 19th century. It was already built before, but it was really transformed in the 19th century with its park around it. And the people who developed these chateaux and parks, they were extremely proud of their vineyards. So there was always a sort of mise en scène of the vineyard. So here you have seen the little alley with cyclamen, which is a way. It's that sort of an Italian, I don't know the word anymore, but anyway, in many Italian gardens, you have these little paths that go up hills. In other parks, you have big alleys with pine trees or cypresses. And it was also a time where there's been a lot of research. Sorry, we have the train. So you try to hear a big noise. Voilà, it's gone. Yeah, there has been a lot of research in the 19th century in Vineyard. There was a man called Guillory who traveled a lot, went to Switzerland and took the idea of terraces. And so he built up some terraces in the Coulée, the Ferrand, in Roche-aux-Moines, and also where we were a little earlier, underneath are some terraces that I'm going to replant later. They made research on how to fight against the disease like oidium and mildew, which also came, I think, from America. We have a lot of pollen from America. And after the phylloxera, the research continued. And for example, it was not only negative because they started planting in rows. It was the time of industrialization. And there were some, of course, the use of horse, not yet tractors, but horse with plow behind. It was impossible before the vines were all in bushes, but not in rows. So only man could go through that, even a horse couldn't. So after the phylloxera, it was really the beginning of having the vineyard in a row, in rows. So that was a big progress, because then you could have a horse with something behind, and after you could have a tractor. So you see, we are preparing for the harvest. The press has been cleaned, and some small tanks for small experimentation. Voilà. And we are going into the cellar. Very dark. Voilà. So you have the bottles here of our wine. I'm going to put some more light. Voilà. Much better. So this is where le clos du papillon is being raised, where it ferments and it's raised, and also les caillardières. So when you see a C, it means caillardière, and when you see a P, it means papillon. Voilà. And you have PR, those are the press. Alors, that means when we press those grapes, the first juice that comes out is full of polyphenols and a little hard, and so we put it away and we raise it separately. And sometimes it evolves and it becomes very good, which is the case this year, I mean with the 19. And sometimes we don't use it in papillon or in caillardière. So either we make a special cuvée for ourselves, or we put it in jalousie, depending. We always try, but it makes a very different wine. So it's raised separately. Voilà. So here you have the range, not completely, but some. You have Belle Dame, which is made with grapes that I bought in 2017 when we had frost. So I needed to get grapes to be able to make more wine than just what we had. And you have Vendange, which is also 17. So this is the 3 barrels that we could make, only 3 barrels. Second generation of grapes that grew about 2 months after the frost. And then you have our regular wines, les caillardières, and Clos du Papillon, which are both here in those barrels. And then you have the red Anjou in Émotion, which is a very nice Cabernet Franc, very light red. And then Eau de Pluie, which is made with the Verdelho from Madeira, which is it has the same, half of the genes of Verdelho are the same as Chenin. It's Savagnin. Chenin Blanc comes from Savagnin, and Sauvignonat, which I'm sorry is not very elegant, but everybody has little secrets. Voilà. So, comment ça s'appelle? Verdelho doesn't come from Sauvignonat. It comes from Savagnin and another grape which I don't know yet. So,
Eveline, could you explain how Verdelho got to Savagnin?
Yes, Verdelho arrived in the 18th century. It was a time when people still imported a lot of plants from South America or from China, Japan. For example, hydrangeas came at that period. And the boats were, of course, sailing past Spain, and they stopped sometime to get water, fresh water, and things to eat, fresh food. And they collected this grape, and they brought it to Anjou. And it's extremely, it tastes very much like exotic fruit. So it's so different from the Chenin, which is really quite austere by itself. The Chenin tastes like our landscape. It is very mineral. But Verdelho is very, very fruitful. And so people got very crazy about it. It was very fashionable. And everybody planted some. And there is still a lot in the Coulée de Ferrand, for example. But nobody tells. It's totally illegal. My mother planted some. I have a small vineyard of 1 hectare with Verdelho, and we make this cuvée, which is a demi-sec, which is quite delicious. Voilà. So the wines the grapes are pressed. We keep the juice about 24 hours in a big tank to decant, and then it's directly put into the barrel here, and it ferments here. You can see that that's unusual, but this is 19 and it's still fermenting. you see that there is still gas pushing the water. This is water to protect so that the insects don't go inside. But you see, you should just saw a bubble. It's still fermenting. Voilà. Each vintage is different. In this vintage, the 19, which tastes very nice, but the yeast are a little weak. So, they are close to the end. Stopped because it's very cold outside, but it was not the case this year. We didn't have a cold winter. I don't know. I guess they got COVID. They didn't want to work anymore. But anyway, we are close to the end, and we are quite relieved because the wines in fermentation for a long time like that are extremely fragile. So we are really afraid that they get the bacteria. One barrel got the bacteria. Here, this one. And so we go to a lab and we analyze the must or the wine every week. And when we saw it had a strange taste, we added 2 grams of sulfur. Otherwise, there is no sulfur in the wine, which I think is so interesting. It's something that has been developed in Savennières in the last 10 years. But before that, if you buy all Savennières, they had quite a lot of sulfite, which makes them live forever. But is that what we want? I'm not sure. So I'm going to taste a little bit of Vendange. I haven't tasted it for a long time. No. So this has a very very fresh fruit aroma, although it's not harvested like Jalousie, but it was a very unusual year. So it's a lot of grapefruit, citrus on the nose, still extremely fresh. So quite mineral, very tense in the mouth. And I really would recommend that with cheese. I think it would be wonderful. You should get a tray of cheese and try this wine, especially with Comté or very old Gruyere. I don't know if you get that anymore, or is it taxed also?
No, we can get it. We can get it.
You can get it. You know, these cheeses have some fatness that I think makes a very good balance with this type of wine. So I tried the Caillardière. So the Caillardière is the vintage 18. That's what's in the market right now.
As you're tasting, Eveline, there's a couple of questions that people have.
Yes, sure.
When you're, the idea in the future is if you replace a vineyard, will you always plant in Goblet, or will you continue to replant in Y?
Well, I'm very pleased with the Goblet. So I think, yes, I will replant in Goblet. And I have, we couldn't go because it's quite far, but I have 2 hectares that are 4 years old now. For the first time, we will harvest this new vineyard, and it's planted in Goblet. So yes.
The sulfur that you add before the bottling, generally, yes. I know it varies from time to time and from cuvee to cuvee, but generally, yeah. what's the amount finally?
2 grams. 2 grams, never more. It's minimal. But I think it's important to protect. The wines are really completely natural until bottling, So it's important especially for those which travel to abroad. Here in France, we have some customers that prefer no filtration and no sulfite, and we do a few bottles, more and more, I would say. of papillons and jalousie with no filtration and no sulfur at all. I don't know how long they can be kept, but when they go from here to the restaurant directly, there is no risk. That's fine.
Could you talk a little bit about how the 2020 vintage is shaping up now that you're going to begin harvesting on Wednesday?
Yeah, exactly. We're beginning to harvest on Wednesday. There is no rush. I don't know. But yes, on Saturday, I was at Eric Morgat's vineyard, the beautiful vineyard that's overlooking the Loire, and half of the harvest is rotten. So I was terrified, and I rushed to the vineyard to see, and we don't have that problem. Apparently, he told me that because he's directly over the river, it's always a little more fragile. But no, we don't have rot. I think the weather is going to be very nice in the next week. We had a lot of rain, which was very useful because the summer was so dry that the berries were tiny and hard and not mature. And honestly, it's very strange. Like I think it's 12 days ago, the sugar level would have made 8 degrees of alcohol. And now it jumped to 11 in 12 days, which is unusual. Usually it's 1 degree per week. So the climate is really very strange. But we had a lot of rain and it was not cold. So I was afraid, moist and heat. That's very good to develop rot. But so far, it looks good, and we have a good harvest.
You were talking overall about the ecosystem in Savinière, in the plateau.
Yes.
Perhaps what percentage of the land is now farmed organically or biodynamically?
Well, I don't know exactly, because I know some winemakers who are perfectly honest and really do it. I know that they are honest and they do it, but they're not satisfied. But I think about 80% of the vineyard is farmed organically. So that's huge, and that's wonderful.
That's really, really impressive.
Yeah. I'm very happy about that. And also it helps because I don't know if you have that problem in the US, but here there is a lot of agri-bashing. People are complaining about agriculture and all the chemicals and all that. And people who live near the vineyard, they're very afraid, and I can understand them. So the fact that there are so many people being organic here, and we already had a meeting with the population, and we explained what we are doing and how we do it, and we made them taste the wines, and so they were reassured. So I think that's also very important to have a good relationship with the neighbors who are not in viticulture. So I was tasting the Caillardière. So that's a very different nose.
Evelyne Matty asks a question, continuing the idea of the percentage of people who are working organically and the move to work organically. What is the reason that people have turned towards organic or biodynamic? Is it from influence of the market? Is it influence of the peers of other winemakers in the region, other grape growers in the region?
Honestly, in Savinière, I don't think it's influence of the market. I think from the discussions I have with my colleagues, I think everybody has been really searching the best way to produce a wine that typically reflects the landscape. And everybody is interested in going very natural here and not changing what this beautiful landscape can give us. Honestly, I think it's really trying to help nature but not to changing it. It's the mentality of people here. Of course, they are very happy that the market like that, but it's not for the market that they did it. Most of them, I mean, maybe one or two, I don't know, but most of them are interested in looking for this balance and for respecting the rhythm. I didn't talk about rhythm, but rhythm are also very important. That's part of biodynamics, the rhythm of the plant and how it, it is subject to the influence of the moon and of day and night and so on. So all these winemakers are really interested in botanics and in the soil. We have a lot of discussions when we have meetings. It's always about that. So that's not the market.
I know that
they're very sincere.
Came to the idea of working biodynamically at some point during the course of time that we've worked with you. What was your what they say aha moment when you said yes, I need to move to biodynamic? When did you?
Yeah. Well, I always wanted to do it. It's just that I had here, I arrived 22 years ago, and there were some people working here who were not very young, and they had a very bad image of biodynamics. They thought it was very esoteric, and they didn't want me to be a witch. So they wanted to have a normal boss. I promised them I would not become a witch, although sometimes I am. But it took a long time, and really I had to wait for two of them to retire before I could really say, haha, this is what we are doing now. And now everybody agrees and is very interested. And we're trying our best. It's still very experimental. It's not easy to be in biodynamics. You can't always follow what we should follow. So you have to adapt, but everybody is very willing to do it, and that's quite exciting. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's great. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. Do you have more questions? Do you have more questions on the vinification or?
I'm asking people if they have any questions. I don't have any right now.
Okay, so maybe I can talk a little bit about the way my strategy when I joined the company. I had visited South Africa and California and other places who had very developed wine tourism. And I was very impressed with that. And I liked the idea, and I thought, well, I have this house and I have the park, and I like to invite people in my home. And so from the beginning, I started to develop the workshops and parties and dinners and tastings and a lot of things around the wine to be able to explain the wine. So that's something that now is working very, very well. We have had big successes in developing this proposal. And I also, my background is more in literature and art and music. And for me, wine is a cultural product. When people talk about vin nature, wine is not natural, because wine is made by man. Nature makes vinegar. Nature doesn't make wine. So I think wine is something cultural, and it has to be placed in the middle of culture. So I have, like we had last week, a music festival. We have a literature festival. We have a lot of cultural activities. And I do also propose on a regular basis a little exhibits on different themes, like the trade on the Loire or history of Chenin or anything like that. Well, this is the way I like to place the wine in a cultural environment, also with gastronomy. I personally like to eat very much and to drink. And I think wine is to be shared in a meal. This is very French, but we really like to have beautiful meals with lovely drinks, lovely bottles, lovely wine. And so this is something that we have developed also. Voilà. The other markets I have is the export. So we have exported to the US for a very long time, even before we were with Dressner. But Dressner arrived in the scene approximately at the same time as me for the Domaine, and it's been quite an exciting adventure, I must say. Very challenging, but wonderful. And I export quite a lot now to Northern Europe, especially to Norway, which is amazing because it's a small country. But Chenin Blanc is now something that wine amateurs have, they know about Chenin Blanc. And I've been doing some lectures and masterclass on Chenin Blanc quite a lot in Northern Europe. We do export also to Japan, and that's it's a difficult market because everything has to be always perfect, but that's also what I want. And I must say our wines are wonderful with Japanese food. The way they serve fish is very, very good with Chenin Blanc. And now we are developing the sales to Australia and probably more countries in Singapore and Korea. Well, we are looking at these markets. South America is more difficult. So I don't know, but Canada also is, we sell in almost every state. I'm very surprised because in Nova Scotia, for example, I don't know who is drinking our wine, but I'm very proud. Probably with fish, I would say.
Goes well.
Voilà.
There's
yeah, it goes very.
Let me ask some questions because people have a couple. In terms of the more recent vintages in the teens, let's say of this century, what is turning out to be your preferred vintage? And what do you think of the 2018 vintage and the ageability on the 2018?
I like very much 18. I think it's a lovely vintage. I think we, when I started in 2001, I I had very little knowledge on wine, and I made lots of experimentation. So there is a lot of variation in these old vintages. And then finally, after a few years, I found my style. And I'm now I think we have quite a consistent style over the years, even though the vintages are different, of course, but we have a style for each cuvée. And I don't know, I think 18 is something, is almost ideal. It's exactly what I want. So I'm very happy with 18. Now, to know how old it's going to last, I have no idea. We have opened recently some vintages, 2001. It's lighter than what we do now because we had higher yields. We were not organic at the time when I joined, but it's still very fresh. And I think even you have tasted some old vintages here. They can keep for a long time. But yeah, I think the difference with before is that before you had to wait, and now you can drink them young. They're also very good young. So that's interesting. I think people, yeah.
Because of the winemaking and the yields, that it's kind of hard to compare the older, really older wines, the wines before 2000, let's say, to the
Exactly.
wines that are being produced now. So it's kind of hard to
Mm.
judge how long something will last based on those wines, because there were such different structure and different
Exactly.
components and different, you know, the sulfur
Yes.
added, etc.
Mm, mm, mm. Yes, but I think the what is important for a long life is the structure of the wine. And
Absolutely.
even though the taste and the style is different, you have a strong structure. I think it's something that's very typical from Sauvignon is this tannic structure. If you taste it blind, you might think that it's a red wine sometimes, because it has this little tannic structure, and that's what makes the wine able to last for a long time. And it's very typical from Sauvignon. You don't have that so much in the Anjou, where you have very good wines too, but they don't have this strong structure, strong tannic structure. Well, I think it's the quality from our hills. But the structure differs also from, for example, from Les Caillardières to Le Clos du Papillon. It's quite different. Le Clos du Papillon has, we couldn't go there, but it has much more, it's a very stony soil. And I think that changes the structure quite a lot. It's more severe in its use, but it's also a very pure, very elegant wine. As the Caillardière is immediately very, very round, very voluptuous, because the soil is covered with a little bit of sand. That's the top of the hill, and there you have some sand on top of the rocks. And every winemaker who has vineyards in that style, and there are many over 7 years, their wines have the same kind of structure, this sort of voluptuous, silky texture, which is very different from Clos du Papillon. And la jalousie, no, you don't have la jalousie here, but la jalousie is not from a specific area. It's a date of harvest. So when you harvest about 100 days after the flower, you get some very fresh fruit aromas. It's more grapefruit, citrus, and those aromas are very volatile. So I have these wines in tanks, not in this barrel. And if you wait, and this is what I do for Le Papillon and Caillardière, then you get more, quite a different taste. The molecule that have produced these fresh fruit aromas, they have disappeared. The skin is much thinner. It's a little brown, and you get more pear or cooked apple, grilled almonds. It's quite different. So the date of harvest probably also has an influence on the ability to age. I think if you wait a little bit more, you probably get more ability to age. I'm not sure that Jalousie can age as well as Caillardière and Papillon. But, you know, you never know. It's hard to tell.
Well, Eveline, this
yes?
Sorry, go ahead. Please finish up what you were going to say.
No, and I think amazingly, the Anjou ages also very well. This is at the bottom of the hills, and it's quite a sandy area too. And we still have some old vintage, better and better. So when it's young, it's sometimes a little too tannic, but when it ages, it's getting really smooth and quite delicious. Well, you had a question.
No, I was going to say we should wind it up because people are still working here in the States. It's still work time.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
So we want to thank you very much for allowing us to come visit you. It was fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
It was great to see you. We can't wait to see you in the flesh.
Yes.
When all this subsides. We really look forward to it, and really thank you, Eveline. And thank you, Adeline, also very much for your camera work. And
Yeah, she's been fantastic.
yeah, she's great.
She has a cramp holding the camera.
Yes, I know. She's probably, her arm is very tired right now. So.
Thank
Right,
you very, very much.
Thank you very, very much. And au revoir.
Au revoir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.